If you saw your friend's husband walking through an airport with another woman, and your friend had no idea,
That would you do?
If you saw a friend's husband with another woman and knew the wife had no idea, what would you do? Los Angeles International Airport moved with its usual urgency. Rolling suitcases crossed polished floors. Departure announcements echoed across the terminal. Business travelers hurried toward boarding gates while others searched the large digital screens for their flight numbers. Elena Vargas stood near Gate 52 holding her boarding pass. She had arrived early. Her production company in Los Angeles had arranged a last-minute trip for a media conference across the country. The assignment felt routine, another quick flight before returning to the city she loved. Her eyes drifted toward the priority boarding lane a few steps away. Executives and first-class passengers gathered there while airline staff prepared the early boarding group. Elena barely paid attention at first. Then her body stiffened. A tall man stepped into the lane. Dark tailored suit, calm posture, confident stride. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone used to commanding rooms filled with powerful people. Elena knew that posture. She had seen it many times during charity dinners and private gatherings in Beverly Hills. Rafael Carvalho, Portuguese technology executive, founder of one of Los Angeles's fastest-growing global logistics companies. More importantly, he was married to Sofia Carvalho. Sofia was not just another acquaintance. She was Elena's closest friend. For a moment, Elena assumed she must be mistaken. Airports were crowded places. People often resembled others from a distance. But as Rafael turned slightly toward the boarding desk, the overhead lights revealed his face clearly. There was no mistake. It was him. Elena's fingers tightened around her phone. Confusion rose first, then concern. Why was Rafael boarding a cross-country flight alone? Sofia had told Elena, only 2 days earlier, that Rafael planned to remain in Los Angeles all week for investor meetings. Elena looked again toward the boarding lane. That was when her stomach dropped. Rafael was not alone. A woman walked beside him, and she was definitely not Sofia. Elena's eyes stayed fixed on the priority boarding lane. The woman beside Rafael moved closer to him as they approached the airline desk. She was striking. Long dark hair rested neatly over the shoulders of a fitted cream coat. Her posture carried quiet confidence. She spoke to Rafael in a relaxed tone, as if their conversation had been going on for hours. Rafael leaned slightly toward her while listening. That small gesture unsettled Elena more than anything else. It felt familiar. Too familiar. Elena had spent enough time around Sofia and Rafael during dinners and charity events to recognize how he behaved with someone he felt comfortable with. He showed the same quiet attention now. Elena swallowed slowly. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Business travel often involves colleagues. Executives worked closely with partners and investors all the time. This could easily be a professional meeting. She wanted to believe that. But another detail quickly challenged that hope. The woman touched Rafael's arm while speaking. The contact lasted only a second. Still, Elena noticed it immediately. Rafael did not step away. Instead, he responded with a small smile that reached his eyes. Elena's chest tightened. Her thoughts moved quickly now. Sofia trusted Rafael completely. Just last weekend, they had shared dinner together at Sofia's home in Beverly Hills. Sofia had spoken about future travel plans and upcoming family celebrations with calm excitement. She had never once hinted at problems in her marriage. Elena looked again at the woman standing beside Rafael. The distance between them was small, closer than two business partners usually stood in a crowded airport. Passengers continued forming lines behind Elena, while airline staff called the first boarding group. Elena barely heard the announcements. Her focus stayed locked on Rafael and the woman beside him. A troubling question formed quietly in her mind. Was this simply work? Or was Sofia about to be hurt in a way she never expected? Elena tried to calm her thoughts. Los Angeles was full of business deals, partnerships, and unexpected travel. Rafael could easily be flying with a colleague. His company operated across several countries. Trips happened all the time. Still, something about the scene in front of her refused to sit quietly in her mind. The woman spoke again, leaning slightly closer as she showed Rafael something on her phone. Rafael looked down at the screen. Then he laughed. Not a polite laugh. A relaxed one. the kind Elena had heard many times during private dinners with Sofia and their close friends. The moment lasted only seconds. But it was enough. Elena felt a heavy knot settle in her chest. Her mind returned to Sofia. Sofia Carvalho had always spoken about Rafael with steady trust. She admired his focus and respected the long hours he invested in building his company. When others questioned how busy his life had become, Sofia often defended him. "He works hard for our future," she once told Elena. Elena believed her. Sofia had always valued loyalty and honesty in relationships. She came from a tight family in Southern California, where trust was treated like a promise. Seeing Rafael now created a conflict Elena did not want. Her eyes moved between Rafael and the woman walking beside him. They reached the boarding desk together. The airline agent scanned their passes. The woman said something quietly. Rafael answered in Portuguese. Elena understood only a few words from past dinners with Sofia, but his tone sounded warm. Comfortable. Too comfortable. The two of them stepped past the boarding gate and entered the private jet bridge. Elena stood frozen where she was. Her phone rested in her hand. One thought kept repeating in her mind. Sofia had no idea this was happening, and Elena now faced a decision she never expected to make. Elena looked down at the phone in her hand. Sofia's name sat near the top of her contacts list. They spoke often, sometimes about work, sometimes about small things in life, but most of their conversations ended with laughter. Sofia trusted Elena the way people trust someone who has stood beside them through many years. That trust now felt heavy. Elena glanced back toward the boarding gate. Rafael and the woman had already disappeared down the jet bridge. The line of priority passengers continued moving forward while airline staff directed the next boarding group. Around her, travelers kept walking. No one else seemed to notice what Elena had just seen. But Elena could not look away from the thought forming inside her mind. Should she call Sofia? The question felt simple, yet the answer carried weight. If Elena stayed silent, Sofia would continue believing everything was normal. If Elena spoke now, she might create fear without knowing the full truth. Elena had always valued loyalty. Sofia had stood beside her during difficult moments in life. Keeping quiet now felt wrong. Her thumb moved across the screen. Sofia's contact opened. Elena hesitated. Another announcement echoed through the terminal. Now boarding group A. Passengers stepped forward quickly. Elena barely noticed them passing. Her focus remained on the phone. One call could change everything. She imagined Sofia answering with her usual calm voice. Sofia would likely be at home in Beverly Hills, preparing for the afternoon meeting she had mentioned earlier that week. Elena raised the phone slightly, then paused again. Something about the situation felt incomplete. She looked up at the large departure screen above the gate. Her eyes searched for the flight number Rafael had just boarded. When she found it, confusion replaced her earlier urgency. Because Elena recognized that flight very well. Elena stepped closer to the large departure screen. Rows of flights filled the board above the gate. Cities changed as the system updated. Boarding groups continued moving forward while airline staff called passengers to prepare their documents. Elena focused on one line. Flight 218. The same flight Rafael had just boarded. Her stomach tightened. Because that flight was also printed on the boarding pass in her hand. She looked down quickly to confirm. Los Angeles to New York. Gate 52. Boarding time 10:40 a.m. It was the exact flight she was scheduled to take. Elena slowly lowered her phone. The realization settled heavily in her chest. She would be on the same plane as Rafael and the unknown woman. Her thoughts moved quickly. If she boarded now, she might see them again inside the cabin. She might hear their conversation. She might understand why Rafael had chosen to travel with someone who was not his wife. But another thought interrupted her. Sofia. Elena looked again at the phone in her hand. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She almost pressed it. Then her eyes drifted back to the departure board. Another detail suddenly caught her attention. Passenger announcements appeared briefly beside the flight number. Elena read the update twice before the meaning fully registered. Her breath stopped. Because another passenger connected to this flight had just checked in. Sofia Carvalho. Elena felt a wave of disbelief. Sofia was boarding this same plane, which meant one thing. In a matter of minutes, Sofia would walk into the same cabin where her husband sat beside another woman. Elena lowered her phone slowly. The noise of the airport faded around her. Everything was about to collide. And 24 hours earlier, none of them had seen this coming. The story begins there. 24 hours earlier in Los Angeles. 24 hours earlier. Morning sunlight spread slowly across the hills of Beverly Hills. From the upper floors of the Carvalho residence, Los Angeles stretched wide beneath the soft glow of the early day. Palm trees lined the quiet street below, while distant traffic moved steadily toward the city's business districts. Inside the house, everything looked calm. The living room reflected careful design, neutral colors, clean lines, large glass walls facing the skyline of Los Angeles. Nothing appeared out of place, yet the silence inside the home felt heavier than the view outside. Sofia Carvalho stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Her dark hair rested neatly over her shoulders while she poured fresh orange juice into 2 glasses. The smell of warm toast drifted gently across the marble counter. Sofia moved with quiet focus. Friends often described her as warm and thoughtful. She grew up in Southern California in a close Hispanic family, where morning meals were often shared with conversation and laughter. She had tried to keep that habit even after marriage, but life had changed. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Rafael Carvalho entered the kitchen, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. Tall, calm, confident. Even at home, he carried the composed presence that had made him respected in business circles across Los Angeles. His Portuguese accent softened his words whenever he spoke English. "Good morning," Sofia said, offering a small smile. Rafael nodded while reaching for the glass waiting for him. "Morning." The exchange ended there. No long conversation followed. Rafael picked up his phone and glanced through a stream of overnight messages while standing beside the counter. Sofia watched him quietly for a moment. This had become their new routine. Same house, same mornings, but the conversations between them had slowly grown shorter. And neither of them had spoken about why. Sofia placed a plate of toast on the dining table near the window. From this corner of the house, the view of Los Angeles always felt peaceful. The hills rolled gently toward the city skyline, while the morning haze lifted slowly above the distant buildings. It was one of the reasons Sofia had loved this home when Rafael first bought it. At that time, the house felt full of possibility. Now the rooms often felt quiet. Rafael sat across from her, but his attention remained on the phone in his hand. His company had grown rapidly during the last 3 years. Meetings, investors, and constant travel had filled his calendar. Sofia understood the pressure of his work. She had supported him through every step of building the business, but lately his schedule seemed to leave little room for anything else. "You slept late last night," Sofia said gently. Rafael nodded without looking up. "Conference call with our European partners." His tone remained calm and professional, the same tone he used during interviews or board meetings. Sofia stirred her coffee slowly. She noticed how quickly he finished breakfast now. In the early years of their marriage, mornings often lasted longer. They talked about travel plans, family visits, or simple ideas for the weekend. Those conversations had slowly disappeared. Rafael placed his cup down and stood. "I have to leave soon," he said while checking another message. Sofia nodded again. She had already expected that answer. Outside the large windows, sunlight climbed higher over the Beverly Hills neighborhood. Luxury cars moved along the quiet street while the city began its busy day. Inside the house, another quiet moment settled between them. Sofia wondered when their mornings had started feeling more like business schedules than shared time. Rafael looked up briefly. His expression remained neutral, but something about the way he avoided her eyes did not go unnoticed. Rafael moved toward the kitchen island and picked up his briefcase. Sofia watched him quietly while finishing the last sip of her coffee. For a moment she considered asking him to sit down again. There were small things she wanted to talk about. Her cousin's upcoming engagement party, plans her parents were making for a family gathering later in the month. Simple conversations that once filled their mornings with warmth, but Rafael's attention remained fixed on the phone screen in his hand. Emails continued arriving. Business updates, messages from partners across different time zones. His company had grown quickly. Investors in several countries now depended on his decisions. Sofia understood the responsibility. Still, something about their life together had shifted. "Are you traveling again this week?" she asked softly. Rafael paused before answering. The delay lasted only a second. "No," he said calmly. "Most meetings are here in Los Angeles." Sofia nodded. His answer sounded reasonable. Travel had always been part of his work. Early in their marriage, she had grown used to sudden trips and unpredictable schedules. But lately he had mentioned wanting to reduce travel and spend more time at home. That promise had made her hopeful. Rafael slipped the phone into his pocket and adjusted his jacket. His reflection appeared clearly in the glass wall facing the city. Tall frame, controlled posture, the same quiet confidence that had drawn Sofia toward him years earlier. She still admired his discipline, but something about the space between them now felt different. Not anger, not open conflict, just distance. Rafael picked up his car keys from the counter. "I'll be back late tonight," he said. Sofia forced a small smile. "Busy day?" "Yes." His answer remained brief. Sofia watched him walk toward the front door. As it closed behind him, the house returned to silence. She stood alone beside the wide windows overlooking Los Angeles, unaware that this quiet morning would soon lead to something neither of them expected. The sound of Rafael's car faded down the quiet street. Sofia remained near the window for a few seconds longer. From the hillside view, Los Angeles appeared alive with motion. Cars flowed steadily toward the downtown skyline, while helicopters moved across the clear morning sky. The city always carried a sense of constant movement. Inside the house, everything stayed still. Sofia walked slowly back toward the kitchen. 2 cups remained on the table, one still half full. She picked it up and rinsed it in the sink before placing it beside the other dishes. Her phone buzzed softly on the counter. A message from Elena. Elena Vargas had been Sofia's closest friend for years. They met through a charity foundation in Los Angeles and quickly became inseparable. Elena's energy and honesty had always balanced Sofia's calmer personality. Sofia opened the message. "Coffee this week?" Sofia smiled slightly while typing her response. "Of course. I miss our talks." She set the phone down again and moved through the house preparing for the day. Her schedule included meetings with the community education program she helped manage in downtown Los Angeles. Work kept her busy. Still, quiet moments often returned her thoughts to Rafael. Their marriage had never been dramatic or loud. They rarely argued. They respected each other's responsibilities. But respect alone sometimes left unanswered questions. She thought about the early days of their relationship. Back then, Rafael spoke about his childhood in Portugal with warmth. He described coastal towns, family gatherings, and the determination that drove him to build his company from nothing. Sofia admired that ambition. Yet lately, he rarely spoke about anything personal. Most conversations now centered on business schedules or travel plans. Sofia picked up her bag and prepared to leave the house. As she walked toward the door, she noticed Rafael's office door upstairs remained slightly open. For a moment, she considered stepping inside. Then she stopped herself. Trust had always been the foundation of their relationship. She chose to leave the door untouched. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the glass walls of Rafael's office tower in downtown Los Angeles. From the top floor, the city looked endless. Lines of traffic filled the highways while construction cranes marked new buildings rising across the skyline. Inside the office, Rafael Carvalho stood near the wide window reviewing documents on his tablet. The room reflected the success he had built during the past decade. Clean, modern design, long conference table, screens displaying logistics maps and financial reports from offices around the world. His company demanded constant attention. Assistants moved quietly outside the office while meetings rotated throughout the day. Rafael's phone vibrated on the desk. He picked it up and read the message quickly. His expression changed slightly. A pause. Then he walked toward the door and closed it. For several seconds, he stood alone in the quiet office. Another message appeared. Rafael read it slowly this time. His jaw tightened. The decision forming in his mind did not look simple. He turned toward the window again, staring across the city as if measuring the consequences of what he was about to do. Finally, he typed a response. Short, direct. Within minutes, his assistant knocked gently on the door. "You have the investor meeting in 20 minutes, she said. Rafael nodded. Reschedule it. She looked surprised but wrote it down. For when? Rafael adjusted his jacket while picking up his briefcase. Next week. He walked toward the door. I need to travel tonight. The assistant blinked in confusion. Travel? I thought your meetings were here in Los Angeles. Rafael paused briefly before answering. So did I. He stepped past her and continued down the hallway. The unexpected decision had already been made. And in Beverly Hills, Sofia had no idea her husband was preparing to leave the city that very night. The next morning in Los Angeles began with movement and noise. Sunlight reflected off the glass towers along Sunset Boulevard, while traffic filled the streets below. Delivery trucks stopped outside cafes. Assistants hurried across sidewalks carrying coffee and folders. Inside a production studio near Hollywood, Elena Vargas reviewed footage on a large monitor. The studio buzzed with quiet activity. Editors worked at computer stations while producers discussed schedules near the back wall. Screens displayed scenes from different projects the company was preparing for release. Elena leaned forward in her chair, studying the final cut of a short documentary segment. Her job required constant attention to detail. Every scene had to feel authentic. Every moment needed to connect with the audience. Cut that transition, she told the editor beside her. The timing feels off. The editor nodded and adjusted the sequence. Elena removed her headset and stretched slightly. Working in media production meant long hours and constant deadlines. Still, she enjoyed the pace of the Los Angeles creative world. Her phone vibrated lightly on the desk. A message from Sofia appeared on the screen. Elena smiled when she saw her friend's name. Their friendship had grown naturally over the past several years. Charity events, shared dinners, and long conversations had turned their connection into something deeper. Sofia trusted Elena, and Elena respected Sofia deeply. She admired the way Sofia supported Rafael's career without seeking attention for herself. Many people in Los Angeles admired Rafael Carvalho for his success, but Sofia never tried to stand in the spotlight beside him. Instead, she focused on her own community programs and family commitments. Elena often told others the same thing. They're solid together, she once said about the couple. At that moment, she still believed it completely. Elena left the studio just after noon. The California sun had warmed the streets of Hollywood, while the sidewalks filled with tourists and production crews moving between locations. She walked toward a nearby cafe, where she often met clients and colleagues. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries filled the room. A few actors sat near the windows reading scripts while a group of writers discussed story ideas in the corner. Elena ordered a latte and sat at a small table near the glass wall facing the street. Her schedule allowed a short break before her next meeting. She opened her phone again. Another message from Sofia appeared. Are you free tomorrow evening? Elena smiled while typing a reply. Of course. What's going on? A few seconds passed before Sofia responded. Nothing serious. Rafael has been busy lately. I just need a break from quiet evenings. Elena leaned back slightly. She understood that feeling. Rafael's schedule had grown demanding over the past year. As his company expanded internationally, his time became divided between investors, conferences, and partnerships across several cities. Still, Elena had always respected how he handled success. Unlike many executives in Los Angeles, Rafael rarely appeared in gossip columns or social events meant only for publicity. He focused on work. That discipline had earned him admiration in business circles. Elena stirred her coffee slowly. She remembered the first dinner Sofia invited her to at their Beverly Hills home. Rafael had spoken about building his company from the ground up after leaving Portugal years earlier. His story carried determination and quiet confidence. Elena respected that. She also believed something else. Despite the pressure of his career, Rafael seemed devoted to Sofia. At least, that was how it had always appeared. Elena finished her coffee and stepped back onto the busy sidewalk. Traffic moved steadily along the boulevard, while production vans parked near studio entrances. The energy of Los Angeles never seemed to slow down, especially near the entertainment district. She checked the time on her phone. Another meeting waited across town. Her car sat in a nearby parking structure, and within minutes she joined the afternoon traffic heading toward the west side of the city. Driving through Los Angeles often gave Elena time to think. Her mind returned briefly to Sofia. Their conversation earlier that morning had sounded light, but Elena sensed something beneath it. Sofia had not complained about Rafael's schedule, yet the mention of quiet evenings suggested something had shifted at home. Elena understood how demanding business life could become. Still, Rafael had always seemed aware of the balance between work and family. That balance was part of the reason Elena respected him. Many people spoke about Rafael Carvalho with admiration. A Portuguese entrepreneur arrived in California with little more than determination, building a logistics company that now operated across several continents. Stories like that attracted attention, but Elena had always admired something simpler. Rafael treated people with calm respect. During charity events, he listened carefully when others spoke. He remembered names. He supported Sofia's community programs without asking for public recognition. That quiet support had made their marriage appear strong. Elena slowed at a traffic light while glancing at the skyline ahead. The thought crossed her mind again. If Sofia ever needed help, Elena would stand beside her without hesitation. Loyalty mattered. Friends protected each other when life became complicated. The light turned green, and Elena continued driving. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again through the car speakers. This time, the caller was someone from work. Elena tapped the button on the steering wheel to answer the call. "Hi, Elena," a familiar voice said through the car speakers. It was Marcus Delgado, one of the executive producers at the media company she worked with. "Are you driving?" he asked. "Yes," Elena replied while merging into another lane. "On my way to the afternoon meeting." Marcus sounded slightly rushed. "Change of plans. I need to ask you something." Elena focused on the road ahead while listening. "What's going on?" "There's a media conference in New York this week," Marcus said. "One of our presenters can't make the trip. I need someone experienced to cover the event and conduct the interviews." Elena glanced briefly at the navigation screen. "That's a quick turnaround," she said. "I know," Marcus replied. "The conference starts tomorrow evening." Elena considered the timing. Most large conferences in New York attracted international business leaders, technology investors, and media networks. Opportunities like that often led to valuable professional connections. Still, the short notice surprised her. "When would I leave?" she asked. Marcus answered without hesitation. "Tomorrow morning. Early flight from LAX." Elena slowed slightly as traffic tightened near an intersection. "Which flight?" Marcus read the information from his schedule. "Los Angeles to New York. Departure around mid-morning." Elena nodded, even though he could not see her. "Send me the details," she said. "I'll check my schedule tonight." Marcus sounded relieved. "Perfect. I'll email the ticket and conference information." The call ended a moment later. Elena continued driving through the Los Angeles traffic while thinking about the opportunity. A sudden work trip. A conference filled with major industry names. It sounded exciting. She had no idea the same flight would soon connect her to something far more personal. Late afternoon lights settled over Los Angeles as Elena arrived back at the production studio. She parked and walked inside while reading the email Marcus had just sent. Flight details, conference schedule, hotel reservation, everything had already been arranged. Elena paused near the entrance hallway and opened the ticket confirmation. Departure airport, Los Angeles International Airport, destination New York. Departure time 10:40 a.m. She read the time again. Tomorrow morning. The schedule looked tight, but manageable. Elena had handled last-minute travel before. Media work often required flexibility, especially when important events appeared suddenly. She walked toward her office while thinking through the next steps. Pack a small suitcase tonight. Confirm the interview list. Review background notes for the conference speakers. Nothing about the assignment seemed unusual. Inside her office, Elena placed her bag on the desk and sat down. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Sofia. "Are we still meeting this weekend?" Elena typed back quickly. "I may have to travel for work tomorrow. New York conference." 3 dots appeared on the screen as Sofia began typing. "That's exciting. Call me tonight. I want to hear about it." Elena smiled. "Of course." She placed the phone on the desk and leaned back in her chair. The sudden trip felt like a normal part of her career, but something about the timing felt oddly connected to the conversation she had just had with Marcus. A conference, New York. Early morning flight from LAX. Elena looked once more at the ticket confirmation on her screen. She had no way of knowing another passenger on that same flight was preparing to leave Los Angeles for reasons far more complicated, and by tomorrow morning, their paths would cross inside the same airport terminal. Morning traffic toward Los Angeles International Airport moved steadily. Cars lined the wide entrance roads leading toward the terminals, while airport signs directed travelers toward departures and parking structures. Shuttle buses passed slowly between lanes, while travelers rolled suitcases across crowded sidewalks. Inside one black sedan moving toward Terminal 4, Rafael Carvalho sat quietly in the back seat. The driver spoke briefly through the rearview mirror. "We'll reach the terminal in about 10 minutes. Rafael nodded without answering. His phone rested in his hand. Several unread messages filled the screen. Notifications from investors, updates from company executives, a reminder about a conference call scheduled later in the day. Normally, Rafael responded to every message immediately. Today, he ignored them. His gaze moved toward the window as the car passed the large airport signs. Lax departures. A small tension settled across his expression. Rafael was known for his calm control during business negotiations. Colleagues often described him as someone who rarely appeared unsettled. Yet this morning felt different. His mind replayed the conversation that had taken place the previous afternoon in his office. A message, a name, a meeting he had not expected. That meeting now waited for him across the country. The driver slowed near the terminal entrance. Travelers stepped out of cars while airport staff guided traffic toward the drop-off lanes. Airline signs glowed above each entrance while passengers hurried inside pulling luggage behind them. Rafael adjusted the sleeve of his jacket. From the outside, he still looked composed. Inside, his thoughts moved carefully through the decision he had made. A sudden trip, no explanation offered at home, and a meeting that might reopen a part of his past he had kept quiet for years. The car stopped at the curb. Rafael stepped out into the morning rush of LAX. Across Los Angeles, Sofia Carvalho stood near the kitchen counter finishing her morning coffee. The house remained quiet. Sunlight entered through the tall windows, warming the marble floors while the city slowly filled with daytime activity. Sofia checked the time on her phone and glanced toward the calendar on the wall. Her schedule for the day looked simple. A community education meeting in the afternoon, a phone call with one of the program coordinators, then dinner at home later that evening. She walked toward the living room and noticed Rafael's office door upstairs remained closed. That was not unusual. He often left early for meetings across the city. Her phone buzzed. A short message from Rafael appeared on the screen. Unexpected business trip. Leaving today. Back soon. Sofia read the message twice. Travel was part of Rafael's work. Conferences, investor meetings, and negotiations often required sudden changes in his schedule. Still, she had not expected a trip today. She typed a quick reply. "Safe travels. Let me know when you land." A moment later, his response appeared. "I will." The exchange ended there. Sofia placed her phone on the table and continued preparing for the day. Trust had always guided their relationship. Rafael never shared every detail of his work, but Sofia had never asked for constant explanations. She believed successful marriages depended on confidence in each other's intentions. Outside, a delivery truck passed slowly along the quiet Beverly Hills street. Sofia walked toward the front door and picked up her bag. Her mind remained calm. Rafael was traveling for work. That was all she believed. And somewhere across the city, Rafael had already entered Los Angeles International Airport. Across the city, Elena Vargas finished packing a small suitcase inside her apartment. The trip to New York had arrived quickly. She placed her laptop inside a travel bag, checked her passport, and reviewed the conference schedule once more. Interviews with several technology leaders were already listed on her calendar. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus appeared. "Car service should reach you in 15 minutes. Elena closed the suitcase and carried it toward the door. Morning sunlight covered the streets of Los Angeles as she stepped outside. The familiar energy of the city surrounded her. Cars moved steadily through intersections, while distant construction cranes rose above the skyline. Travel had always been part of Elena's work. New cities, new interviews, new stories to capture. Still, she felt a quiet excitement about this particular conference. Several major technology companies would be present, including executives whose work had shaped global logistics and infrastructure. The car service arrived shortly afterward. Within minutes, Elena joined the traffic heading toward Los Angeles International Airport. Inside the car, she reviewed the conference notes on her tablet. Her mind focused entirely on the upcoming interviews. She had no reason to expect anything unusual about this flight. Across town, Rafael Carvalho was already inside the airport. Across Beverly Hills, Sofia continued her morning without concern. 3 separate routines unfolding across Los Angeles, none of them aware that within the next hour their paths would begin moving toward the same destination. The car slowed as the large airport entrance signs came into view ahead. Los Angeles International Airport. Elena closed her tablet and looked out the window as the driver guided the car toward the departure lanes. Inside Los Angeles International Airport, Rafael Carvalho moved through the private terminal entrance reserved for priority passengers. The polished floors reflected the overhead lights, while airline staff guided travelers toward security and boarding areas. Conversations blended with the sound of rolling luggage and distant boarding announcements. Rafael walked with steady confidence. Anyone watching him would assume he was simply another executive traveling for business, but his focus remained fixed ahead. He checked his watch. Boarding would begin soon. A message appeared on his phone. "I'm inside the terminal." Rafael read the message quietly. He looked toward the entrance of the private lounge. A few seconds later, the woman stepped inside. She walked toward him with calm familiarity. Tall, elegant, composed. Her presence carried the confidence of someone accustomed to moving through executive spaces. Rafael greeted her with a reserved nod. "You arrived quickly," he said. "Traffic was light," she replied. Her accent carried a soft European tone. For a moment, neither of them spoke further. They sat in the lounge, while travelers around them prepared for boarding. Rafael's expression remained controlled, but something about the situation clearly demanded careful attention. The woman placed her phone on the table. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," she said. Rafael folded his hands together. This conversation was overdue. The words carried quiet weight. Around them, the airport lounge continued its routine. Passengers reviewed documents. Staff announced flight updates. Coffee machines hummed softly in the background. Yet the meeting between Rafael and the woman seemed separate from the movement around them. A chapter of Rafael's past had quietly returned, and it was about to place him on a flight that would soon become far more complicated than he expected. The departure level of Los Angeles International Airport filled steadily as boarding time approached. Travelers checked screens above the gates, while airline staff guided passengers toward the correct boarding lines. Announcements echoed through the terminal as flights prepared for departure. Elena stepped inside the terminal and pulled her suitcase behind her. The large departure board above the hall listed dozens of flights leaving the city that morning. She scanned the screen until she located her flight to New York. Gate 52. Boarding soon. She followed the signs through the terminal, passing busy coffee counters and travelers rushing between gates. The familiar pace of airport movement surrounded her. Nothing about the moment felt unusual. At least not yet. Elena reached the gate area and found an empty seat near the boarding lane. She set her bag beside her and checked the conference notes once more on her phone. Nearby, airline staff began preparing the boarding scanners. Passengers gathered in small groups, while others waited quietly near the windows overlooking the runway. Elena glanced up briefly. The priority boarding lane stood a few steps away from where she sat. Executives and first-class travelers had already begun forming a short line. One of them caught her attention. A tall man in a dark suit stepped into the lane. His posture looked familiar. Elena frowned slightly while watching him move forward. He turned toward the airline desk. The overhead lights revealed his face clearly. Her breath stopped. Rafael Carvalho, Sofia's husband. Elena sat up straight in her chair. Confusion arrived instantly. What was Rafael doing on this flight? Sofia had told her earlier that week he planned to remain in Los Angeles. Elena's eyes followed him carefully. That was when she noticed the woman walking beside him. And in that moment, the quiet morning inside the terminal suddenly felt very different. Elena remained seated near Gate 52, while passengers continued forming lines around the boarding area. Her eyes stayed fixed on Rafael Carvalho. He stood only a short distance away in the priority lane, speaking quietly with the woman beside him. Their conversation looked relaxed, almost familiar, as if they had known each other for years. Elena's heart began beating faster. Her first instinct was simple: call Sofia. Her phone already rested in her hand. One tap would connect her to the person who trusted her most. But Elena did not move. Her mind rushed through several questions at once. What if there was an explanation? Business travel sometimes requires close collaboration. Executives met partners and investors constantly. Airports were filled with professional colleagues traveling together. Still, something about the moment felt difficult to ignore. The woman stood close to Rafael. Their voices carried a quiet ease that suggested more than a formal work meeting. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Sofia had always believed in Rafael completely. Just yesterday she had spoken about him with calm admiration. Elena imagined the phone call. "Sofia, I think I just saw Rafael at the airport with another woman." The sentence alone could shake Sofia's trust. What if Elena misunderstood the situation? She might create unnecessary fear inside a marriage that had never shown signs of public conflict. Around her, boarding announcements began echoing through the terminal. Priority passengers may begin boarding. Elena looked down at her phone again. Her thumb hovered near Sofia's name. Loyalty told her to speak immediately. Caution told her to wait. The choice in front of her suddenly felt far more complicated than she expected. Passengers in the priority lane stepped forward one by one. Airline staff scanned boarding passes while the line moved slowly toward the jet bridge. Rafael and the woman advanced with the group, their quiet conversation continuing as if the crowded terminal around them did not exist. Elena watched carefully. Her thoughts refused to settle. She imagined Sofia sitting at home in Beverly Hills, unaware of what was unfolding inside this airport terminal. Sofia trusted Rafael without hesitation. That trust had always seemed strong, steady, and uncomplicated. Elena respected that kind of loyalty. It was one of the reasons she admired her friend so much. Still, the image in front of her continued to challenge that belief. Rafael leaned slightly toward the woman while speaking. She responded with a soft laugh. The interaction looked natural, comfortable, not like two strangers traveling for the first time. Elena lowered her gaze to the phone again. She opened Sofia's contact page. Her thumb hovered near the call button. A few seconds passed, then she closed the screen. Something inside her hesitated. If she called now, Sofia might panic before understanding the full situation. A single moment seen from across an airport might not reveal the entire story. Elena knew how easily misunderstandings could grow. The safer choice might be patience. Observe first, speak later. Around her, the boarding process continued. Travelers stood, gathered their bags, and joined the line moving toward the aircraft. Elena picked up her suitcase slowly. Her own boarding group would be called soon, and if Rafael was on this flight, she might see more once they were inside the cabin. Group B may now board. The announcement echoed across the terminal. Elena stood and joined the line forming near the gate. Passengers moved forward in a slow rhythm, while airline staff checked boarding passes and directed travelers toward the jet bridge. She kept her distance, still close enough to watch. Rafael and the woman had already disappeared down the corridor leading to the aircraft. Elena stepped onto the jet bridge a few minutes later. The narrow passage carried the quiet hum of engines waiting outside. Travelers ahead moved steadily toward the aircraft door, while flight attendants greeted passengers inside the cabin. Elena entered the plane and paused briefly while checking her seat number. Row 21. She moved down the aisle, placing her suitcase in the overhead compartment, before settling into the seat beside the window. The cabin gradually filled. Passengers lifted bags, adjusted seats, and exchanged polite greetings while preparing for the long flight across the country. Elena tried to focus on her conference notes again, but her thoughts refused to stay at work. Instead, she found herself scanning the rows ahead. She noticed Rafael several seats forward on the opposite side of the aisle. The woman sat beside him. Neither of them had noticed Elena. Their conversation continued quietly. Elena leaned back in her seat, pretending to read while observing them through the reflection on the window. Part of her still wanted to reach for her phone. Another part told her to wait. A long flight offered time. Time to watch. Time to understand. If there truly was something wrong, Elena would see it soon enough. The aircraft door closed moments later. The engines began their slow rise in sound, and Elena prepared herself for several hours of silent observation. The aircraft pushed away from the gate as the engines grew louder beneath the wings. Passengers settled into their seats while the flight attendants began the safety demonstration near the front of the cabin. The calm routine of air travel filled the space with quiet order. Elena fastened her seatbelt and leaned back. From her seat she could clearly see Rafael several rows ahead. The woman beside him sat close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Neither of them appeared tense. They spoke quietly while waiting for the aircraft to begin its climb. Their voices were too soft for Elena to hear clearly, but the comfort between them was visible. Rafael turned slightly toward her. His posture relaxed in a way Elena recognized. It was the same posture he often showed during private dinners with Sofia. That observation unsettled her. Elena looked down at her phone again. The screen remained dark. She could still call Sofia. The plane had not yet taken off. One message could change everything. Yet doubt returned immediately. What if she misunderstood the moment? What if Rafael and the woman were simply colleagues traveling to the same event? Elena had seen business partners behave comfortably together before. She imagined Sofia receiving a sudden call during the middle of her day. Fear would arrive instantly. Questions would follow, and Elena would have no clear answers yet. The engines roared stronger as the plane moved onto the runway. Elena slowly placed the phone back into her bag. The decision formed quietly in her mind. She would not call Sofia. Not yet. Instead, she would watch carefully during the flight. Observe every detail. If the situation truly threatened Sofia's marriage, Elena would learn the truth before speaking. The aircraft lifted into the sky moments later, and the long flight east began. The plane reached cruising altitude nearly 40 minutes later. Seatbelt signs turned off, and the cabin relaxed into the quiet rhythm of a long flight. Some passengers opened laptops. Others leaned back with headphones or closed their eyes. Elena remained alert. From her seat, she could still see Rafael and the woman a few rows ahead. Flight attendants moved down the aisle offering drinks, while passengers settled deeper into their seats. Rafael accepted a glass of water. The woman declined politely. For a moment, they both sat quietly, looking forward. Then she turned toward him. Elena leaned slightly toward the aisle, pretending to adjust her bag while listening carefully. The woman spoke softly. Her voice carried warmth, the kind used with someone familiar. "Rafael," she said gently. The sound of his name reached Elena clearly this time. Not formal, not distant, affectionate. The tone carried history. Rafael turned toward her and responded in Portuguese. Elena could not understand the full sentence, but she recognized the rhythm of personal conversation rather than business discussion. The woman smiled. Her expression showed comfort, even relief, as if this meeting meant something important to both of them. Elena slowly leaned back in her seat again. Her earlier doubt began fading. This did not look like a simple work trip. The familiarity between them suggested something deeper, something connected to Rafael's life before Sofia. Elena felt the weight of the situation settle more heavily in her chest. She had chosen to wait before calling Sofia, but now the flight had barely begun, and the questions inside her mind were only growing stronger. Because the way the woman said Rafael's name sounded like someone who had once been very important in his life. The steady hum of the aircraft filled the cabin as the flight continued across the country. Outside the window, clouds stretched endlessly beneath the plane, while the sky remained clear and bright above. Inside the cabin, most passengers had settled into their routines. Some worked quietly on laptops. Others watched movies or slept beneath thin travel blankets. Elena remained attentive. Her eyes moved occasionally toward Rafael and the woman seated beside him. They had lowered their voices again, speaking quietly while leaning slightly toward each other. From a distance, the conversation appeared calm, but Elena sensed something personal behind their words. She opened her laptop briefly, pretending to review conference notes. In truth, her attention remained fixed on them. After several minutes, Rafael stood and stepped into the aisle. He walked toward the rear of the plane, likely heading for the restroom. The woman remained in her seat. Elena watched her carefully. The woman's expression shifted once Rafael disappeared behind the curtains separating the cabin sections. Her calm posture softened slightly. replaced by a thoughtful look that seemed almost reflective. A flight attendant approached the row with a tray of drinks. "Would you like anything else?" the attendant asked politely. The woman smiled gently. "Tea, please." Her accent carried a clear European tone. Elena noticed the detail immediately. When the attendant handed her the cup, the woman thanked her in Portuguese. The pronunciation sounded natural, fluent. Elena felt a quiet realization forming in her mind. This woman did not simply know Rafael professionally. She shared his language. And perhaps far more than that, Rafael returned to his seat a few minutes later. The woman looked up as he approached, her expression softening immediately. "You took long," she said quietly. Rafael gave a small shrug before sitting down again. "Lines?" The answer sounded simple, yet the way she studied his face suggested deeper familiarity. Elena watched from several rows behind while pretending to type on her laptop. Rafael leaned closer toward the woman. Their conversation resumed in Portuguese. Elena could not follow the words, but she noticed something else: the tone.
As the flight continued, Elena began hearing fragments of a story Sofia had never been told.
Elena could not follow the words, but she noticed something else: the tone. It carried history, not the cautious language of two people meeting after years apart. Their voices moved with ease, like people who had shared long conversations many times before. The woman laughed softly at something Rafael said. Her hand rested lightly against the armrest between them. Rafael did not pull away. Elena felt her earlier uncertainty growing heavier. This situation did not resemble a business meeting. She closed her laptop slowly. Her mind drifted back to Sofia again. Sofia had spoken about Rafael's life before moving to the United States, but only in general terms. She knew he grew up in Portugal and later studied in Europe before launching his company in California. But Sofia had never mentioned anyone like this. No former partner, no past relationship strong enough to create the quiet connection Elena now witnessed. Elena leaned her head slightly toward the aisle again. The woman spoke Rafael's name once more, this time with a tone that sounded almost nostalgic. "Rafael." He looked at her with the same calm focus. And in that moment, Elena felt the situation shift again, because whatever history existed between them had clearly not been forgotten. The flight continued quietly across the country. Cabin lights dimmed slightly as passengers settled into the long hours between departure and arrival. A few people walked through the aisle stretching their legs, while others spoke softly to the attendants passing with drink carts. Elena remained alert. Her attention stayed fixed on the row ahead. Rafael and the woman had shifted closer during their conversation. Their voices remained low, but fragments of English now appeared between the Portuguese phrases. Elena heard the woman say something that caught her attention. "It has been many years." Rafael nodded slowly. Yes, the single word carried weight. The woman looked toward the window beside her before speaking again. "I never thought we would sit on a flight together again." Rafael responded after a short pause. "Neither did I." Elena felt her stomach tighten. That sentence alone revealed more than she expected. This meeting had not been planned recently. Their connection clearly reached far into the past. The woman's voice softened. "When I heard you moved to Los Angeles, I wondered if our paths would ever cross again." Rafael leaned back in his seat. "Life changes many things," he said quietly. The woman gave a small smile. "Some things remain the same." Elena looked down quickly to avoid being noticed. Her thoughts raced. This was no ordinary acquaintance. These two people shared history, years of it. The possibility Elena had feared earlier now felt far more real. Sofia believed Rafael had built his life in California after leaving Portugal behind, but the woman beside him clearly belonged to that earlier chapter. And judging by the tone of their conversation, that chapter might not have ended as completely as Sofia believed. Several hours later, the aircraft began its gradual descent toward New York. Passengers lifted their window shades as the captain announced the upcoming arrival. Far below, the outline of the city slowly appeared through the morning haze while the plane lowered toward the airport. Inside the cabin, people gathered their belongings and prepared for landing. Elena watched Rafael and the woman carefully. Their conversation had continued throughout most of the flight, shifting between quiet moments and longer exchanges that clearly carried shared memories. When the plane finally reached the gate, Passengers began leaving their seats. Rafael stood first, retrieving his bag from the overhead compartment. The woman followed closely behind. Elena waited several rows back, allowing them to exit ahead of her. Once inside the terminal, the movement of travelers spread quickly through the arrival hall. Announcements echoed across the ceiling while luggage carts rolled past in every direction. Rafael and the woman walked side by side through the crowd. Elena followed at a distance. Their voices reached her occasionally as they moved through the airport corridor. "You remember the cafe near the river?" the woman asked. Rafael nodded. "Yes, we spent too much time there." She laughed softly. "Those were good years." The words confirmed Elena's growing suspicion. This was not a brief encounter between former acquaintances. Their shared memories sounded personal, deep. Elena slowed her steps as they approached the exit leading toward the airport transportation area. She felt a growing unease settle inside her chest, because the connection between Rafael and this woman did not feel distant. It felt unfinished. The arrival hall outside the terminal filled with the noise of travelers greeting drivers and arranging transportation. Taxi lines stretched along the curb, while hotel shuttles waited near the outer lane. Screens above the exit doors displayed directions for conferences taking place across the city. Elena stepped outside with the flow of passengers. She kept Rafael and the woman within sight. They stopped briefly near the transportation area. A black car waited nearby. The driver stepped forward and opened the rear door. Before entering the car, the woman turned toward Rafael. Her voice lowered, but Elena stood close enough to hear the words clearly. "I still cannot believe you agreed to see me again." Rafael paused before answering. This conversation needed to happen. The woman studied his face. "You disappeared after Lisbon," she said quietly. Rafael's expression remained controlled. Life moved quickly. The woman shook her head slightly. "No. You chose to leave." Elena felt the air shift around them. Lisbon. The name carried weight. That city was part of Rafael's past long before he moved to California. The woman stepped closer. "For years I wondered if you regretted it." Rafael looked at her steadily. "Regret is complicated." The woman held his gaze for several seconds. Then she spoke again, almost gently. "You married someone else?" Rafael did not respond immediately. The silence between them lasted just long enough to confirm something Elena had begun to fear. This was not a simple reunion. This woman had once been deeply connected to Rafael. And judging by the way they looked at each other, the story between them might not be finished. 2 days later, Los Angeles welcomed another bright afternoon. The skyline of downtown shimmered beneath clear California sunlight, while traffic flowed steadily through the wide avenues below. Glass towers reflected the movement of the city, while banners outside the convention center announced one of the largest technology logistics conferences of the year. Inside the main conference hall, hundreds of guests gathered for the opening reception. Executives, investors, journalists, and industry leaders moved through the elegant venue while servers carried trays of drinks across the polished floors. Conversations filled the room as large presentation screens displayed the logos of global companies attending the event. Elena Vargas stood near the media registration table reviewing her notes. Her work assignment had placed her directly inside the conference environment, but her attention remained divided. Ever since the flight, the conversation she overheard between Rafael and the woman had continued echoing in her mind. Lisbon, years of history, questions without clear answers. Elena had considered calling Sofia many times during the last 48 hours, yet she had held back. She wanted certainty before speaking. The conference doors opened again as new guests entered the reception hall. Elena glanced toward the entrance briefly, then looked back at her notes. Across the room, Rafael Carvalho stood speaking with several investors near the main stage. His posture looked calm and professional as always, the confident presence that had helped him build his company across international markets. The woman from the flight stood beside him, listening, watching. The connection between them remained visible even from across the crowded room. Elena exhaled slowly. The situation had grown far more complicated than she expected. And somewhere across Los Angeles, another person had just made a decision that would soon change everything. Earlier that same afternoon, Sofia Carvalho stepped out of a car in downtown Los Angeles. Tall glass towers rose above the busy streets, while banners outside the convention center announced the International Logistics Conference taking place inside. Business travelers moved through the entrance doors, while photographers captured images of arriving executives. Sofia looked up at the building with quiet curiosity. Her visit had not been planned long in advance. That morning she had received a call from one of Rafael's company partners. The firm was hosting an investor reception at the conference, and several guests had asked about Rafael's wife. Sofia rarely attended these events. She preferred focusing on her community programs rather than standing beside Rafael during corporate presentations. But something about the invitation felt important. A chance to support him. A chance to appear beside him during a moment that clearly mattered for his company. She adjusted the sleeve of her blazer and stepped toward the entrance. Inside the lobby, polished marble floors reflected the movement of guests arriving for the reception. Staff members guided attendees toward the registration tables, while large screens displayed information about the evening's program. Sofia approached the welcome desk. A staff member smiled politely. "Welcome to the conference. Your name, please?" "Rafael Carvalho." The woman quickly checked the list and nodded. "Yes, of course. Mr. Carvalho is already inside the reception hall." Sofia accepted the badge handed to her. Her expression remained calm. She had not told Rafael she planned to attend. The idea of surprising him felt simple and thoughtful. She imagined the look of pleasant surprise on his face when he saw her. Sofia walked toward the large doors leading into the reception hall. Inside the reception hall, Elena moved carefully through the crowd with her recording tablet. Cameras flashed near the main stage where several industry leaders were preparing for interviews. Conversations filled the elegant room, while waiters carried glasses of wine between small groups of guests. Elena tried to focus on her work. Still, her eyes kept returning to one area of the hall. Rafael stood near the center of the room speaking with two investors. The woman from the flight remained beside him, listening quietly while the conversation continued. From across the hall, their closeness remained visible. Elena felt the same tension return to her chest. She had waited 2 days without telling Sofia what she saw. The decision still felt uncertain. Maybe the situation had an explanation she had not heard yet. Maybe the woman from Lisbon was simply someone Rafael needed to meet for business reasons connected to his past. But the way they looked at each other suggested something more complicated. Elena turned toward the entrance again, while scanning the room for her next interview. At that exact moment, the large reception doors opened. Several guests entered together. Among them stood a familiar figure. Elena froze. Rafael Carvalho stepped into the hall. Her expression carried calm curiosity as she looked around the room searching for Rafael. Elena's heart dropped instantly. She had not expected Sofia to appear here. Not today. Not in this room. Her mind raced. If Sofia continued walking forward, she would soon see Rafael. And she would not see him alone. Elena felt panic rise quickly. She reached for her phone without thinking. Because the situation she had been trying to understand quietly was about to unfold directly in front of her friend. Elena stood still near the media table while the reception hall continued buzzing around her. Sofia had already begun walking farther into the room. She moved slowly, greeting a few guests who recognized her while scanning the crowd for Rafael. Her calm smile showed no hint of concern. She believed she was about to surprise her husband. Elena felt a wave of panic rush through her chest. Her phone remained in her hand. This was the moment she had been trying to avoid. If Sofia continued walking, she would reach Rafael within seconds. And Rafael was not standing alone. Across the hall, Rafael remained in conversation with the investors. The woman from the flight stood beside him, listening quietly while occasionally speaking with the group. Neither of them had noticed Sofia yet. Elena's thoughts moved quickly. Should she run across the room and stop Sofia? Should she have warned her before she saw the scene with her own eyes? Or should she stay silent and let the moment unfold naturally? Her loyalty to Sofia pulled strongly in one direction. Her uncertainty about the full story pulled in another. Elena looked again at Sofia. Her friend continued moving deeper into the reception hall, weaving through the crowd with quiet confidence. The distance between Sofia and Rafael was shrinking. 15 steps. 10. 8. Elena's grip tightened around her phone. This was the exact moment when she needed to choose. Should the friend tell the wife immediately, or wait until she knows the full truth? Elena did not move, because before she could decide, Sofia had already turned her head toward the center of the room, and her eyes found Rafael. Sofia's eyes settled on Rafael across the reception hall. For a moment, her expression brightened. He stood near the stage speaking with several investors, exactly where she expected him to be during an event like this. The sight of him confirmed she had arrived at the right place. She began walking toward him. Elena watched from a distance, her heart beating faster with every step Sofia took. Across the room, Rafael continued speaking confidently. His calm voice carried through the conversation, while the investors nodded in agreement. The woman from the flight remained beside him. Her posture relaxed. Her attention focused entirely on Rafael. She stood slightly closer to him now than she had earlier. The movement between them looked natural, familiar. Sofia continued walking forward, weaving through the crowd. 5 steps closer. 3, 2. Rafael finished speaking to the investors and turned slightly toward the woman beside him. For the first time since the conversation began, he smiled openly. Not the professional smile he often used in meetings. A warmer one. The woman returned the look. That was the exact moment Sofia reached the group. She stopped. Her gaze moved from Rafael to the woman standing beside him. Silence settled over the small circle of guests. Rafael noticed Sofia a second later. His expression changed instantly. Surprise, confusion, then something else. The woman beside him looked between them, realizing quickly who had just arrived. Across the room, Elena felt the tension tighten, because Sofia now stood in the same space where her husband faced a woman connected to his past, and none of them could step away from the moment that had just begun. The small group near the center of the reception hall fell silent. For a brief moment, the noise of the event faded into the background. Sofia stood facing Rafael. The surprise in his eyes was impossible to miss. "Sofia," he said quietly. Her expression remained calm, though confusion appeared in her gaze. "I thought I would surprise you," she replied gently. The investors standing nearby exchanged uncertain looks before slowly stepping away, sensing the sudden shift in the conversation. The woman beside Rafael remained where she was. Her posture straightened slightly as she studied Sofia with careful attention. Rafael cleared his throat. "I didn't know you were coming." Sofia glanced around the reception hall. "One of your partners called earlier," she explained. "They said the event would include families, so I thought it would be nice to support you." Her voice carried warmth. No accusation, no suspicion. Yet the moment still felt heavy. Sofia's eyes moved toward the woman standing beside Rafael. The woman returned the look with quiet composure. For several seconds, no one spoke. Elena watched from across the room, her heart pounding. She could see the tension forming even without hearing every word. Rafael finally spoke again. "Sofia, this is—" He paused. The hesitation lasted just long enough to change the mood. Sofia noticed it immediately. The woman spoke first. "My name is Ines," she said calmly. Her Portuguese accent carried clearly in the quiet space. Sofia nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." The greeting sounded courteous, but something about Sofia's tone had shifted. She looked back at Rafael. The question forming in her mind had not yet reached her lips. But the silence between them made one thing clear. This introduction had arrived far too late. The reception hall continued its quiet rhythm around them. Music played softly near the stage while guests resumed conversations across the room. Yet inside the small circle where Rafael, Sofia, and Ines stood, the air felt still. Sofia studied the woman carefully. Ines held her gaze without hesitation. There was nothing hostile in her expression, yet the familiarity between her and Rafael remained obvious. Sofia turned slightly toward her husband. "How do you know each other?" she asked. Her voice stayed calm. Rafael did not answer immediately. The pause lasted only a few seconds, but it was long enough for Sofia to notice. Ines glanced briefly toward Rafael before speaking. "We met many years ago," she said. "In Portugal." Sofia nodded slowly. She already knew Rafael's early life began there. Still, something about the way Ines spoke suggested a deeper connection. "How many years ago?" Sofia asked. Rafael exhaled quietly. "Before I moved to the United States." Sofia folded her arms gently across her waist. "And you're meeting again now?" The question carried no anger, only curiosity. Ines answered again, "Yes." After a long time, her tone remained steady. Elena watched from across the room, feeling the tension grow stronger with every sentence. Sofia's gaze returned to Rafael. "You didn't mention this meeting," she said softly. Rafael looked down briefly before responding. "It came up unexpectedly." Sofia held his eyes. "You traveled across the country to see her." The statement hung between them. Rafael did not deny it. The silence that followed carried far more meaning than any explanation he might have offered. The tension between the three of them deepened. Sofia remained composed, but her eyes revealed growing confusion. "You traveled here to meet someone from your past," she said slowly. "And you didn't think to mention it." Rafael's shoulders shifted slightly. "I didn't know how to explain it." Sofia gave a small, uncertain laugh. "That usually means the explanation matters." Ines watched them quietly. For a moment she looked as if she might step away and give them privacy. Instead, she remained where she was. The truth was already unfolding. Rafael finally spoke again. "Ines and I knew each other before I left Portugal." Sofia nodded. "You've said that." Rafael hesitated once more. Then he continued. "We were close." The word carried weight. Sofia's expression changed slightly. "How close?" Rafael looked toward Ines briefly before answering. "We were together." The meaning landed instantly. Elena felt the shift even from across the room. Sofia remained still. "A relationship?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "How serious?" Rafael did not respond. This time Ines answered instead. "Very serious." Her voice remained calm, though her eyes held a trace of emotion. For several years, Sofia slowly absorbed the words. The pieces of Rafael's past were beginning to form a picture she had never seen before. "You never mentioned her," Sofia said to her husband. Rafael's reply came carefully. "That part of my life ended a long time ago." Sofia looked again at Ines, the woman who once shared years with the man she had married. But the way Ines and Rafael looked at each other suggested something else. Not just history, something unfinished. Sofia remained standing between Rafael and Ines, absorbing the information slowly. The music and conversation from the reception hall continued around them, yet their small circle felt separated from the rest of the room. "You were together for years," Sofia said quietly. Rafael nodded once. "Yes." Sofia's voice stayed steady, though the surprise had not left her face. "And you never told me." Rafael ran a hand across his jaw. "I told you about my early life in Portugal." "You told me about your work," Sofia replied gently. "About your university years, about building your company." She paused. "But you never told me about her." Ines shifted slightly, but remained calm. Her presence added weight to the conversation simply by standing there. Sofia looked at her again. "Did you know he was married?" she asked. Ines answered honestly, "Yes." The direct response created another quiet pause. Sofia nodded slowly. "And you still agreed to meet him?" Ines held Sofia's gaze. "This meeting was not about interfering with your marriage." Rafael stepped forward slightly. "Sofia, this conversation should have happened years ago." Sofia turned toward him again. "What conversation?" Rafael hesitated. The answer clearly carried something deeper than a simple reunion. Ines spoke again, her voice softer this time. "Rafael left Portugal suddenly." Sofia frowned slightly. "He told me he moved to the United States for business opportunities." "That is true," Ines said. She looked toward Rafael briefly before continuing. But that was not the whole story. The room seemed to grow quieter around them, because Sofia was now realizing that the life Rafael described from his past had never been complete. Sofia's attention moved slowly between Rafael and Ines. The calm expression she carried when she entered the reception hall had faded. In its place stood quiet confusion. What part of the story was missing? She asked. Her voice remained controlled, though the weight of the moment was clear. Ines looked toward Rafael first. He gave a slight nod. It was permission. She turned back to Sofia. When Rafael left Lisbon, Ines said, "Our relationship had not ended." Sofia felt the words settle heavily in the space between them. "You mean, you didn't break up?" Inez shook her head slowly. No. Sofia's eyes moved toward her husband again. Rafael did not interrupt. His silence confirmed the truth. For years, Inez continued, we believed we would build a life together. The sentence hung in the air. Sofia took a small step back. And then he left. Rafael finally spoke. It wasn't that simple. Inez nodded slightly. No, it wasn't. She looked directly at Sofia. There were circumstances that forced Rafael to leave Portugal quickly. Sofia studied both of them. You're saying the relationship didn't end because you stopped loving each other? Inez answered quietly. No. The honesty in her voice carried no anger. Only history. Sofia's mind raced through the implications. If Rafael had left Portugal without truly closing that chapter of his life, then the past standing in front of her might still hold unfinished emotion. She looked directly at her husband. One question rose above every other thought, and when she spoke, the room seemed to grow even quieter. Rafael, she asked slowly, when you married me, was that chapter of your life truly over? The question Sofia asked lingered in the quiet space between them. Rafael did not answer immediately. For the first time since she arrived at the reception, his calm composure began to weaken. His eyes lowered briefly before returning to Sofia's face. The silence felt longer than it actually was. Around them, the reception continued. Guests moved between conversations, while the skyline of Los Angeles glowed through the tall glass windows surrounding the hall. But within their small circle, everything had slowed. Finally, Rafael spoke. When I left Portugal, he said carefully, I believed distance would solve everything. Sofia studied him closely. What does that mean? Rafael took a slow breath. My company was just beginning. Investors in the United States offered an opportunity I could not refuse. Sofia nodded slightly. You told me that part? Yes. Rafael looked briefly toward Inez before continuing. But I did not end things properly before leaving. The words landed heavily. Sofia's eyes remained fixed on him. You left without closing the relationship. Rafael nodded. Yes. Inez lowered her gaze quietly. Elena watched from across the room, her chest tightening. Sofia's expression remained calm, yet something deeper had begun shifting beneath the surface. You disappeared, Sofia said slowly. Rafael's voice softened. I thought leaving would make the decision easier. Sofia gave a small, disbelieving shake of her head. For you maybe. Rafael did not argue. Instead, he spoke the truth he had avoided for years. I cared about Inez deeply. The admission carried weight, because for Sofia, the life she believed she understood was beginning to reveal pieces that had never been shared. Sofia remained still after hearing Rafael's words. The admission hung heavily between them. I cared about Inez deeply. For several seconds, she said nothing. The reception around them continued with quiet elegance. Glasses clinked softly while conversations flowed between guests. Outside the tall windows, the Los Angeles skyline slowly shifted toward evening. Inside Sofia's mind, the moment felt far louder. So you left the country, she said slowly, without ending a relationship that lasted years. Rafael nodded. Yes. And then you built a life here. Yes. Sofia folded her arms gently. And somewhere in the middle of that life, you married me. The sentence carried quiet force. Rafael looked directly at her. I loved you when we met. Sofia held his gaze. That isn't what I asked. Inez remained silent beside them, understanding that this conversation now belonged to the married couple. Sofia continued speaking. You built a life with me, she said calmly. A home, a future, plans we discussed together. Her voice lowered slightly. And all that time there was someone else whose story you never finished. Rafael tried to respond. It wasn't like that. Sofia gave a small shake of her head. You hid part of your life. The truth stood plainly between them. Years of silence. Years of an unfinished chapter. Across the room, Elena watched with growing discomfort. She felt the weight of knowing earlier than Sofia. Every moment of hesitation now echoed louder in her mind. Sofia looked again at Rafael. What changed now? She asked quietly. Why meet her again after all these years? Rafael looked toward the windows for a moment before answering. Outside, the evening sky had begun shifting into deep blue above the Los Angeles skyline. Lights from surrounding buildings flickered on one by one, reflecting across the glass walls of the conference hall. He returned his attention to Sofia. "Inez contacted me several weeks ago," he said. Sofia listened carefully. "She wanted to talk?" Sofia nodded slightly. "So you flew across the country to meet her?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me?" Rafael lowered his voice. "I wasn't sure how to explain it."
Trust survives mistakes only when truth replaces secrecy. The future of their relationship remained uncertain.
His voice. "I wasn't sure how to explain it." Sofia's expression hardened slightly. "That explanation seems important now." Inez spoke quietly from beside them. "I didn't reach out to interfere in your marriage." Sofia looked at her. "Then why contact him after so many years?" Inez hesitated for a brief moment. Then she answered, "Because there were questions between us that never received answers." Her honesty filled the silence again. Sofia turned back toward Rafael. "You owed her closure." Rafael nodded. "Yes." Sofia held his gaze. "But you also owed honesty to the person you married." Rafael did not deny it. The weight of that truth sat clearly on his face. Across the room, Elena watched the conversation unfold with growing guilt. She remembered every moment on the flight when she considered calling Sofia. Every second she chose to wait. Now the consequences of that silence stood directly in front of her friend. Sofia finally spoke again. "So this meeting was about the past?" "Yes," Rafael said, but Sofia studied him carefully. "And you're certain that's all it is?" Rafael did not answer Sofia's question right away. The silence stretched between them. Outside the tall windows, the night skyline of Los Angeles glowed brightly, casting reflections across the polished floors of the reception hall. Sofia waited patiently. "And you're certain that's all it is?" she repeated. Rafael looked at her steadily. "I needed to understand what we left unresolved," he said. Sofia studied his face carefully. "You needed answers." "Yes. And after all these years, you believed the only way to get them was to fly across the country and meet her in private." Rafael exhaled slowly. "When she contacted me, it brought back things I never dealt with properly." Sofia nodded once. "That part I understand." Her tone remained calm. "What I don't understand is why you chose silence instead of honesty." Rafael looked down briefly. "I was afraid it would hurt you." Sofia gave a faint, bitter smile. "It did." The directness of her answer made Rafael look back up. Sofia continued, "You didn't protect me by hiding this." She paused. "You simply delayed the moment when I would learn the truth." Inez shifted quietly beside them, aware the conversation had reached its most painful point. Sofia's voice softened slightly. "For years I believed I knew the man I married." Rafael said nothing. "Now I'm realizing there were parts of your life you never allowed me to see." The words were not loud, but the emotional distance between them had grown unmistakable. Across the hall, Elena watched with a heavy feeling in her chest, because the quiet conversation unfolding between them now carried the weight of years of silence. The reception hall had grown quieter as the evening continued. Many guests had moved toward the main stage for the scheduled presentations, leaving larger spaces between the remaining groups inside the hall. Sofia and Rafael now stood near the window overlooking the city. The skyline of Los Angeles stretched wide beneath the night sky, lights glowing across the distant buildings and highways. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Sofia finally broke the silence. "You didn't just hide a memory," she said softly. Rafael listened. "You hid an unfinished relationship." He nodded slowly. "Yes." Sofia looked toward the skyline before turning back to him. "That changes everything." Rafael's voice carried quiet regret. "I never meant to hurt you." Sofia answered calmly. "Intent does not erase the truth." A long pause followed. Across the room, Elena watched the two of them with a heavy feeling of guilt. She remembered every moment on the flight when she debated calling Sofia. Every second she waited. Now the situation had unfolded without warning. Sofia looked at Rafael again. Her voice remained steady. "For years I trusted that our marriage was built on honesty." Rafael stepped slightly closer. "It still can be." Sofia studied him carefully. "Trust is not rebuilt with promises." Her eyes moved briefly toward Inez. who stood several steps away. Then back to Rafael. Sofia inhaled slowly. If someone hides their past in a relationship, does the relationship still deserve a second chance? Sofia finally spoke again. Her decision came calmly. I need time away from this. Rafael's expression shifted immediately, because the woman who had always stood beside him had just taken the first step in a completely different direction. The conference ended later that night. Guests slowly left the venue while the lights of downtown Los Angeles reflected across the quiet streets below. Conversations faded as staff began clearing tables and closing sections of the hall. Sofia walked out of the building alone. The evening air felt cooler than she expected. Traffic continued moving through the city, but the noise felt distant compared to the thoughts filling her mind. She entered a waiting car without speaking much to the driver. During the ride home, she looked out the window at the passing skyline. Her emotions were complicated. There was pain. There was disappointment. But more than anything, there was clarity. For years, she believed her marriage rested on complete honesty. Learning about Rafael's unfinished past had shaken that belief in a way she never expected. Still, she refused to respond with anger. Anger would only cloud her judgment. When the car reached Beverly Hills, Sofia stepped out quietly and entered the house. The same calm space she had left earlier that week welcomed her again. She walked slowly through the living room and sat near the window, overlooking the quiet neighborhood. Her phone buzzed shortly afterward. Rafael's name appeared on the screen. She stared at it for several seconds before answering. His voice sounded careful. Sofia, I'm sorry. The apology arrived quickly, but Sofia understood something important. Apologies did not immediately repair broken trust, but they could begin the process of accountability, and accountability was something she needed to hear before deciding what came next. Rafael did not return home that night. Instead, he remained in a quiet hotel room near downtown Los Angeles. The city lights stretched beyond the window, while the traffic below moved steadily through the late hours of the night. He sat alone in a chair near the glass wall. For the first time in many years, the pace of his life slowed long enough for reflection. Success had come quickly once he arrived in California. New investors, expanding offices, global recognition. Each step forward demanded focus and discipline. But somewhere along that path, he had convinced himself that leaving parts of his past behind would simplify his future. Now he understood the cost of that decision. His phone rested on the table beside him. The call with Sofia earlier had been short. She had listened. She had not shouted or accused him. Instead, she spoke with calm honesty. I need time to think, she told him. Those words carried more weight than anger. Rafael leaned forward and placed his hands together. He knew he had created the situation now unfolding in his life. By avoiding a difficult truth years ago, he had allowed silence to grow into something far more damaging. Inez had not demanded anything from him during their meeting. She had only wanted closure. But the meeting revealed something Rafael could no longer ignore. Honesty delayed eventually becomes honesty forced, and when that moment arrives, the consequences often reach further than expected. 2 mornings later, the California coast welcomed a calm sunrise. Soft light spread across the Santa Monica shoreline while gentle waves moved toward the sand. Early walkers passed along the path beside the ocean, enjoying the quiet hours before the city fully woke. Sofia stood near the edge of the water. The cool air carried the sound of the tide, while the horizon slowly brightened with the first colors of morning. She had come here alone. The beach had always helped her think clearly. For 2 days she had reflected on everything that happened. The conversation at the conference, the truth Rafael revealed, the years of silence that now felt heavier than she expected. Still, the time away had helped her understand something important. Her life did not depend entirely on one relationship. She had her work, her family, her own identity that existed long before she met Rafael. Trust mattered deeply to her, but trust could not exist without honesty. Sofia looked toward the ocean again. She knew Rafael regretted the way his past had been hidden. She believed his apology carried sincerity, yet rebuilding trust required more than regret. It required transparency. It required patience, and it required both people to face the truth without fear. Sofia inhaled slowly. For the first time since the confrontation, her thoughts felt steady. She was not interested in revenge. She only wanted clarity about what kind of future made sense for her life. And that clarity would only come through honest conversation. Later that afternoon, Rafael arrived at the Santa Monica shoreline. He saw Sofia standing near the water before she noticed him. For a moment, he remained where he was. The quiet ocean stretched behind her, while the afternoon sun reflected across the waves. The peaceful setting contrasted sharply with the emotional tension that had existed between them only days earlier. Finally, Sofia turned. Their eyes met. Neither of them rushed toward the other. They simply walked slowly until they stood a few steps apart. Rafael spoke first. "I've spent the last 2 days thinking about everything." Sofia nodded slightly. "So have I." The honesty between them felt different now. Less defensive. More reflective. Rafael looked toward the horizon before continuing. "I convinced myself that leaving Portugal meant leaving everything connected to that part of my life," he said. Sofia listened carefully. "But the truth doesn't disappear simply because we avoid talking about it." Sofia's voice remained calm. "No, it waits." Rafael met her eyes again. "I should have told you about Inez long before we married." The statement carried quiet accountability. Sofia appreciated hearing it spoken clearly. "For years I thought protecting our relationship meant leaving that story behind," Rafael continued. Sofia responded gently. "Protection built on silence isn't protection." Rafael nodded. "I understand that now." A long pause followed as the waves continued rolling onto the sand. The conversation between them no longer felt like confrontation. It felt like two people finally facing the same truth together. The sun lowered slowly over the Santa Monica shoreline. Warm light reflected across the water, while the evening breeze carried the steady rhythm of the tide. Sofia and Rafael stood quietly for a moment longer. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. Rafael finally spoke. "I know I cannot change what happened years ago," he said, "but I can choose honesty from this point forward." Sofia listened carefully. The sincerity in his voice felt real. Still, trust required time. "You hurt me by hiding that part of your life," she said gently. "Not because you had a past, but because you kept it from me." Rafael nodded. "I understand," Sofia continued. "Trust survives mistakes only when truth replaces secrecy." The sentence carried the lesson she had learned during the past few days. Rafael absorbed the words. He knew rebuilding trust would take patience. It would require actions, not just promises. Sofia looked out at the ocean again. "I'm not making a final decision today," she said calmly. Rafael accepted the answer. "Take all the time you need." For the first time since the confrontation, both of them felt the tension easing slightly, not because everything had been repaired, but because honesty had finally replaced silence. The future remained uncertain. Yet one thing had become clear. Every relationship faces moments when truth must replace comfort. And how people respond in those moments defines what comes next. What would you have done if you were in her position?